This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ephraim Graham. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is in Washington, D.C. for 2 days of congressional questioning. At the heart of the matter is what happened to your personal data while you were on Facebook. CBN's national security correspondent Eric Rosales is following this story.
The Facebook founder has reportedly faced intense preparations for today's back-to-back hearings on the privacy data scandal. Now, prior to that testimony, Zuckerberg headed up to Capitol Hill and met with Florida Senator Bill Nelson, the top Democrat on the Commerce Committee.
If we don't watch out with social media and platforms like Facebook and the mistakes that they made in the past, then no American is going to have any privacy anymore.
In a PR push, Facebook released Zuckerberg's opening statement on Monday. In it, Zuckerberg takes responsibility for his company. Zuckerberg states Facebook is an idealistic and optimistic company. For most of our existence, we focused on all the good that connecting people can bring. Zuckerberg lays out his version of what happened in the Cambridge Analytica scandal and Facebook's steps to remedy the events, stating it's clear now that we didn't do enough to prevent these tools from being used for harm as well. That goes for fake news, foreign interference in elections, and hate speech, as well as developers and data privacy. Louisiana Republican Senator John Kennedy says he's concerned Facebook may be too big to fix.
Is it fair for me to give up all of my personal data to Facebook and apparently everybody else in the Western Hemisphere in exchange for me being able to see what some of my high school buddies had for dinner Saturday night? Who owns my data? Do I own it, or does Facebook own it?
So what new regulations could be on the horizon? Technology evangelist Brian Vecchi with Varonis Systems says lawmakers could take a page from Europe, where a new law aims to provide more protection and control for citizens' personal data.
If you're going to collect this information, the personal data of an EU citizen, you need to treat it with respect. You need to treat it like something valuable. You should only collect what you're supposed to, and if you don't need it anymore, you should delete it.
Over the next few days, all 2.2 billion Facebook users will receive a notice titled Protecting Your Information. It will show you what apps you use and what information Facebook has shared with those apps. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
And here's a quick look at some of the other big headlines we're following for you today in the CBN newsroom. Federal agents have raided the office of President Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen. The FBI seized records, including some that are potentially related to a $130,000 payment made to the adult film actress Stormy Daniels. President Trump has called the raid a disgrace. Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas have all made pledges to send troops to the U.S.-Mexico border. President Trump said last week he wants to send 2,000 to 4,000 National Guard members to the border. So far, 1,600 members will be deployed there. A Canadian community already stunned by the death of 15 hockey players and staff has received more devastating news. Investigators announced one of the players has been misidentified. Parker Tobin was said to be alive when the team bus was hit by a semi-trailer Friday night, but he actually died. The mistaken identity happened partly because all team members dyed their hair blonde for the playoffs. You can find more on these stories and others throughout the day at cbnnews.com. President Trump is talking tough on the latest suspected chemical weapons attack in Syria. Monday, he said the U.S. would respond in 24 to 48 hours. For more on this, we turn to Ben Kennedy in Washington.
A horrifying gas attack in Syria prompted President Trump to warn that nothing is off the table in response to the strike that killed at least 40 people. Chilling images of kids surfaced, victims of the latest suspected chemical weapons attack.
We cannot allow atrocities like that.
Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad denied he is behind the violence, claiming the video is fabricated. Not true, said UN Ambassador Nikki Haley.
The monster who was responsible for these attacks has no conscience. Not even to be shocked by pictures of dead children.
The attack took place less than a week after Trump said he wanted to pull U.S. troops from Syria. In the meantime, the soldiers will stay, along with a warning that those involved will pay a big price. Trump also criticized Assad's most powerful supporter, Russian President Vladimir Putin, making it clear he intends to take action.
Does Putin bear responsibility for this?
He may, yeah, he may. And if he does, It's going to be very tough, very tough.
He'll pay a price if
Everybody's going to pay a price. He will, everybody will.
While the president prepared for a meeting with military leaders about Syria, the news came that the FBI had raided the office of Trump's longtime personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Agents took documents, including some possibly tied to a $130,000 payment Cohen made to porn star Stormy Daniels, who says she had a sexual encounter with Trump in 2006, a claim the White House denies. The Cohen raid is apparently not linked to the Russian probe, according to the New York Times, but it also said he's being investigated for bank fraud.
They broke into the office of one of my personal attorneys, good man, and it's a disgraceful situation.
Surrounded by top military advisors, Trump lashed out at the raid and special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, calling it a witch hunt.
That is really now in a whole new level of unfairness.
Today, President Trump is focused on Syria. Last year, he ordered a military strike on a Syrian airfield after a suspected sarin gas attack. But it's now clear Assad did not take the warning seriously, as more civilians were the target of this latest strike. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
An Alabama law allowing judges to appoint an attorney for unborn children of women seeking abortion is on trial today. The 2014 law changed the process that allows minors to get an abortion with the judge's permission instead of parental consent. That process allows the prosecutor to call witnesses to determine whether the mother is mature enough to have an abortion and grants counsel to her unborn baby. An Alabama abortion clinic sued, arguing the law burdens the mother and violates confidentiality. A federal judge struck down the law last summer, and today in a separate court hearing is hearing that Alabama appeal. Coming up here on CBN NewsWatch, Puerto Rico was devastated by twin hurricanes last year. We're going to show you why some people are calling the storms blessings in disguise. Wild weather has been sweeping through most of the country more than 2 weeks into spring, but winter weather slammed down from North Dakota to North Carolina with wind chills in the 20s, snow and ice, causing more than 24 accidents. This all happened over the weekend. Meanwhile, in the South, 10 tornadoes were reported from Texas to Louisiana. This while the West Coast is suffering April storms that are bringing flooding and blustering winds. And it doesn't end there. A mudslide in Pennsylvania collapsing into an apartment complex, evacuating some 30 people. Fortunately, though, no injuries were reported. And of course, we know in the last year, Puerto Rico has seen twin hurricanes, but some say this may be a blessing in disguise. Our Heather Sells has more on this story.
Puerto Rico has been stripped of so much in the wake of Hurricane Maria, but what is flourishing here is the church.
The story of the isolated mountain village of Comarillo tells it all. George Santiago grew up here, but left for more opportunity in the States. Last summer, however, God called him back to start a church in his hometown. At first, nothing seemed to be happening.
When we came here in July 2017, we didn't have a chance to open the Bible and preach the gospel to the people.
But just 2 months later, Hurricane Maria turned this pretty mountain stream into a raging river, and the people of Comarillo were paralyzed, their town in shambles and their access to food and water gone.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was destruction everywhere.
Santiago quickly sprang into action, using his Southern Baptist denomination to find resources like food, water, and even washing machines so people could wash their clothes. These acts of service, he says, became his way back into the community and his path to sharing the gospel.
People were just blown out and were asking all the time, what are you guys doing these?
Since the storm, at least 50 people have come to Christ in Comarillo, and Santiago has started what he calls a baby church for the new believers.
He placed us in Puerto Rico in the right moment, the perfect moment for one church to, give birth.
And Santiago is not alone. Carlos Rodriguez oversees church planting on the island for the Southern Baptists and says Maria has paved the way for enormous spiritual growth.
If you ask any pastor across Puerto Rico, crossing denominations, no one will say that Hurricane Maria was a bad thing in a way. In the human perspective, of course. Still, we have a lot of people without power, limited situations. But from the spiritual perspective, everyone said, no, it was a blessing.
Southern Baptists see a unique opportunity right now. They're planting 3 new churches this year ahead of schedule, and they're pouring hundreds of volunteers and resources into the territory in the hopes of winning more for Christ. Pastor Farland Reynosa is working with mission teams from the states and watching people come to the Lord.
I mean, this is actually bringing a revival to the island, just by helping people put a tent or just cutting the trees, just stuff that it's simple probably for many of us, but for them means a lot.
In San Juan, Maria damaged Pastor Gabriel Pradas' church, but that didn't stop church members from distributing food and water right after the storm.
We converted the church into a distribution center, and we made sure that it went out as quickly as possible.
Even 6 months later, Pradas sees Maria as a huge opportunity for the church. But he's also up against some tough realities, as are other churches. More than 100,000 Puerto Ricans have left the island since Maria. His church has lost people and offerings. But Rodriguez says that believers must see even the migration as an opportunity for the gospel. He's telling churches with members that leave for the States, send them as missionaries.
Don't say it's a loss. No, it's a gain always. Teach those people, if Lord is moving you to the U.S., to the mainland, any state, you have to be connected with the church. You have to be their light. You're going to be a missionary there.
Churches are also acutely aware of severe mental health needs right now. Surviving the storm and its aftermath has led to widespread depression for many and a spike in suicide attempts. But in the midst of such suffering, believers are seeing a hunger for the gospel, an acknowledgement that business as usual just won't work.
I think it's going to be an exponential explosion of many new churches and many people following God's calling to pastor churches, to be that evangelist that God wants us to be. I think Puerto Rico is going to be a main focus point in the Caribbean to keep sharing the gospel even more.
Last month, Pastor George baptized 10 new believers, and he keeps this display of locks with the keys thrown away as a reminder of new souls that cannot be separated from the love of Christ.
We are experiencing a revival, literally a revival. We see people desiring and hungry of hope.
From that perspective, it's a moment of hope in Puerto Rico right now, because as the island is rebuilding physically, it's also rebuilding spiritually. Reporting in Puerto Rico, Heather Sells, CBN News.
For the first time, a sitting U.S. Senator has given birth to a child. Senator Tammy Duckworth, a 50-year-old Democrat from Illinois, gave birth to a daughter Monday. She is her second child with her husband, Brian. Duckworth says she is working to change the Senate rules in order to bring her baby onto the floor while the chamber is in session. The retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel lost both legs while serving in Iraq. She says she is hardly unique as a working mom. Her children, she says, make her more committed to doing her job. Adoption advocates are sounding an alarm about the threat to faith-based adoption agencies. Legal challenges from the ACLU in several states could force some faith-based adoption agencies to close because they wouldn't be able to get licenses if they only want to continue placing children with married couples where the child could have a mom and a dad. This is all coming from the proposed anti-discrimination policies. A panel put together by the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C. addressed the issue. Kelly Clemente shared her story. She is the birth mother. She had an unplanned pregnancy in college and chose to place her son with a couple through a Christian agency. She says if she hadn't had that choice to use a faith-based agency, the already difficult time in her life would have been even harder.
It's not fair to take away a birth mother's right to a faith-based agency because these women don't just have a physical problem. Some of these women are at their weakest moments spiritually, and they are spiritually dying. And if you cannot provide them with spiritual hope, which in my mind, that is the only real type of hope that there is. Jesus is hope for me. And if you take Christ out of that conversation in those rooms with these women that are at their lowest point, like I was, if you take Christ out of the conversation, you are doing them a disservice.
The Adoption Council points out LGBT families have choices of agencies that will place their children in their homes in all 50 states. Taking faith-based agencies out of the equation would only make it harder to find homes for the more than 400,000 children in the foster care system. Well, if you are looking for information about adoption, you can do it, of course, on an internet search, but there's nothing like hearing from someone with personal experience. Here's Charlene Aaron.
Enthusiast for life. I love life. And
to hear Phil and Alex Conjolier tell it, just being together is nothing short of a miracle.
He was the loud, crazy type where you heard him from half a mile away and you knew that he was coming.
For her, it was like, oh, that's totally never going to be a guy that I would ever date or marry, or so why would I spend a ton of time with him? And so,
interested.
But love took over. As a married couple, the pastor and nurse wanted more.
People grow up wanting to have certain careers. My career that I really wanted, I wanted to be a mom, and then it didn't happen.
honestly, there were these moments where we were like, God, if you're so good, why do you keep us from what is good?
The dedication to their dream led Phil and Alex to pursue adoption. Almost immediately, God gave them a sign. A pregnant woman in their church wanted to place her baby for adoption.
He hands me the prayer request card, and it says, we're 37 and a half weeks pregnant and looking for a family to adopt.
9 days later, Kinsley Grace was born.
Peekaboo!
Phil and Alex decided to add to their family again, but this time they didn't want to do it alone. Alex had an idea. Why don't they use YouTube to put themselves out there? Phil wasn't so sure.
Who would watch? Why would they watch? And what would be the point of them watching?
Alex prevailed, and soon, with full transparency, they were documenting their infertility treatments and adoption journey.
They said, you have endometriosis everywhere. Okay, you ready?
No.
Along the way, their YouTube audience began to grow. And then, something they didn't see coming.
We got contacted by a birth mom asking if we would consider adoption again.
A woman following them on social media asked if they would be interested in adopting her baby. They put treatments on hold and began documenting their second adoption. And they shared it all, highs and lows with raw emotion.
Like, we're meeting our daughter
Insane. Tomorrow. It's going to be hard not seeing her for another 12 hours.
We wanted to be honest with you guys on how emotional things are and tell you like the truth and not just glamorize it.
As they edited and uploaded videos of Callie Joe's adoption story, thousands subscribed to their channel for updates.
Birth mom ended up going and signing papers today.
Do you want to hold Callie? Callie!
The overwhelming majority of people were coming to our channel and commenting saying, the love that your birth mom is showing is more than I think I could ever show my own children. And the second was, I now want to go and love people in that same way. And so what we did by telling her story was actually pull out of the heart of what we want to do, which is multiply the love that is in us.
You'll see the family wearing t-shirts that say love multiplies. What started as an adoption fundraiser has now evolved into a full-time calling. Phil and Alex wanted to become the resource that they never had.
If something doesn't exist, it's our responsibility to make it happen. And so we created Love Multiplies, and it is a place for people to come and feel encouraged and supported and educated about infertility, about adoption, and about growing healthy families.
The #1 comment that we hear back in this phase of life of trying to build a family, but it's not happening, is I just don't have anyone that I can turn to. No one understands my grief.
And what's next for the Conjoliers? Still following their dream. Since our interview, another fertility treatment. And another heartbreak.
No, it's negative. I'm so sorry.
But they know God has a plan, and maybe more surprises for them in their future.
Happy Adoption Day! Happy Adoption Day!
Can you say world?
World Adoption Day!
And we're all invited along on the journey.
Do you know what adoption means? What does adoption mean?
Smiley face.
It means smiley face?
How can you not love that story? We're cheering you on. Stay with us as more of CBN NewsWatch straight ahead. I'd like to leave you with this prayer today. Lord, I ask for nothing for myself today. I simply pray that you would make me the answer to someone else's prayer. I hope you'll make that prayer for the rest of the hours that remain in the day and possibly every day. With that, get out and make this a terrific Tuesday. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Thank you so much for your company. Remember, you can always email us at newswatch@cbn.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching. Make it a terrific Tuesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow.